creepy enemies, unique mounts, and castle building? Now that's quite the combo. Today I played the eeriest 2D strategy side-scroller game out there. Today I played over 200 days of Kingdom 2 Crowns. My journey began as I, Noah, of the Vortide family, was wandering through a forest when a random small ghost approached me. Weirdly enough, he started pointing in a direction, and I was enticed to follow it. I'm gonna call you Pointy for obvious reasons. Out of nowhere, this random structure started to collapse. Instead of riding to safety, I just stood there and watched it. Very majestic. Pointy started to get a little bit impatient. So I started to gallop my horse in the direction that he was leading me. I ended up stumbling upon a whole bunch of coins. I don't know who would just leave these here, but it's their loss. I was pretty happy with the amount of coins that I got because I was able to use them to establish a camp and also hire 2 villagers. Pointy wanted me to train one of them as a bowman and the other as a builder. So that's exactly what I did. I then instructed the builder to start constructing a wall halfway around the camp. While he was doing this, I redesigned the camp crest. Obviously, it needed to follow the Vortide colors, but it had to be unique to represent this branch of the Vortide family. I ended up putting a brown ferocious bear on top of a green and white shield. Sure enough, Pointy started pointing again, and I had made my way over to a camp where I could recruit villagers. They didn't look like they were living the best lives at this little camp, so I was happy I could provide a new home for them. Pointy then requested I cut down a tree, train another archer, and then he vanished into thin air. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna miss that little guy. In honor of Pointy, I started to construct some defenses. This included building a new wall, hiring another archer, and then building 2 archer towers. While everything was going smoothly at camp, I started to head out in the search for treasure. While I was galloping, my horse got tired, and Pointy reappeared. He told me that I needed to let my horse graze over some grass in order to restore its stamina. Unfortunately, Pointy ended up disappearing again, but this time I knew he would be back. While exploring to the left of my little camp, I came across a destroyed ship. It looked like I had the potential to possibly rebuild it. I then ran into this random treasure chest that magically opened as I came near it. Gold coins came flying out of it, and I was able to use them on a nearby camp on 2 potential recruits. As I continued further into the forest, a random projectile fell from the sky. You don't see that every day. It appeared to be some kind of bird that had crash landed. I wanted to help it out, looking for the 2 gems that it needed, but as I went further into the forest, I came across these little monsters. You guys don't look friendly, I'm out of here. I had my horse go full speed ahead as we needed to escape whatever these little things were. Unfortunately, it started to get tired, and as I started to walk, they were catching up. I had made it to a little grass patch and let my horse graze. Finally, we're almost to the camp. We made it! As I started to get cozy, the monsters attacked the walls of my camp. The single archer on that side started to take them out. Unfortunately, he wasn't very accurate with his bow, but he got the job done. Thankfully, I ran when I did, because I don't know what those little monsters would have done to me. I was able to build a little tent so that way I didn't have to just sleep around the campfire. I had collected quite a lot of gold and had even just gotten more, so it made sense to upgrade my defenses in case more of those little monsters came by. As the morning dawned upon us, I became super relieved. We didn't have to fight off any more monsters. The events of the other night had made me realize how important it was to build up a strong foundation for our camp. My only concern was, where are we going to get all the funding for this? I had remembered that this random trader who was in the camp yesterday had given me a whole bunch of coins while we were getting invaded. I was so flustered that I didn't even think about it. So now today I paid him some coins, and it looked like he was heading out to go and trade. I was really hoping that he would be able to bring back a whole bunch of gold. That way we could work on even more upgrades. While I was exploring the forest on the right side of my camp, I came across this little house that required these random gems. I honestly had no idea where I could find some from. So I just continued exploring until I bumped into an archer shrine. This shrine also required those random gems, so I just kept moving. Luckily enough, to brighten up my mood, I had found a treasure chest that had a lot of gold coins in it. After making it to the end of the island, I came across this dock that had this very strange looking portal on it. Oh no, it's those little monsters again. I was genuinely curious about them to see if they could be friendly. So I tried giving one a coin, and it just grabbed it and started running back to the portal. I had also closed the distance between me and one of the monsters to see what would happen. It started hitting me, and each time I got hit, a gold coin would fall out of my pouch. I didn't want to keep getting hit by the monster, so I threw another coin at it and started running back to camp. Well, that was eventful. Once back, I finally had enough gold to upgrade my little tent into a nice wooden keep. Even though we didn't get any new technology out of this upgrade, it did make life a lot more comfortable. To pair with the upgrades of the keep, I went out to the right side of the castle and built a new archer tower as well as some more walls. To keep things equal on both sides of the castle, I headed over to the left side. That was where I placed another archer tower and then requested a tree that was blocking the position of where I could put some walls to be removed. With the expansion of our camp, which is pretty much just a castle now, I was able to hire some farmers. You definitely don't want to overlook food, especially when there's more than 5 people relying on you. The tree on the left side of the castle had finally been removed. So I put down a wall on that side and then ordered the removal of even more trees so we could potentially expand our castle even further. I then started to scout out both sides of my castle because I wanted to see where the enemies were coming from. That was when I stumbled upon the trader with his horse inside of a little shack. So now I know where he resides. Weirdly enough, I didn't see any enemies that night. But in the morning, I went and started building some more walls and started the construction over this random little waterfall. I also tried checking to see if I had enough gold to restore the broken ship, but I didn't, sadly. I journeyed back out into the deep forest of the left side of my castle. I passed the crash-landed bird and then came across this magical treasure chest that had given me a whole bunch of gold. I proceeded even further into the forest, and when I got to a little clearing, I came to the side of a mountain. Immediately, when I saw one of those purple portals, I started to run back into the forest towards my little village. There is no chance I was going to be waiting around for those little monsters again. On the way back, I also had ordered that the destroyed ship got repaired. That chest with all the gold coins really did come in clutch. Right as some builders arrived to start rebuilding the ship, I noticed that I had to pay some more gold so we could get more pieces. I was kind of hoping that I wasn't going to have to invest any more gold to this ship, but I did, and it drained my gold pouch. As things transitioned into the next morning, I had paid the wandering trader to go and trade things for me. I had also upgraded my farm. I definitely wanted to produce even more food which could be sold for money. So, it made sense to have a bigger and better farm to do that. I then went to go check on the ship, and apparently I needed to invest even more money into it. Now that's just a scam. I ended up hiring more farmers so they could produce more money, sent out the wandering trader, and then hired some more archers. I really didn't have to hire those archers, but it seemed like there were even more and more little monsters every single night. I started to develop a theory on why the ship needed more pieces. I'm assuming that the ones that I had already paid for were being stolen by the monsters every time that they came and attacked my castle. This was super frustrating, but it was the only explanation to why there would be pieces missing the next morning. I knew hiring farmers would be the best decision of my life. You guys produce so much gold. As I angrily headed over to the ship, ready to invest more money into it, once I did, it was ready to sail. I was pretty satisfied about this, and it made things a lot better as I only had to use 2 more coins on it. So it wasn't the end of the world. Some builders ran over to redirect the ship over to what looked to be a dock. I'm assuming this is where we were going to board it and head over to the next island to explore and expand the kingdom. Once the ship was in position, I rang a bell and a whole bunch of archers and citizens had made their way over onto the ship. They were getting prepared to move out and explore the new islands yet to come. Before embarking on our next journey, I had headed back into the castle, so that way I could hire some more archers to keep the castle safe while I was gone. I then replenished my coin purse so that way I would have a lot of gold going into the new lands. It was finally time for takeoff. I had invested some gold into some resources to get us out sailing, and then we were on the water. It was now time to continue building, exploring, defending, and conquering. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Our ship was destroyed as we crash landed onto a new island. Everyone survived and nobody was hurt, but it was a little bit unfortunate that our ship was destroyed. I then headed more inland with my builders and archers. That was when we came across a perfect campsite. So we started to get set up. Immediately, I started building some archer towers, walls, and then a little campfire. I set things up very similar to how they were set up in our previous castle on the other island. Things were starting off pretty smoothly. I wanted this castle up as quickly as possible, so I started to upgrade my campfire into a little camping tent. That was when I headed further into the forest and started to explore. I ended up coming across one of those small little houses that required a gem to activate, and that was when I found one of those magical treasure chests that had a bunch of coins in it. It was super satisfying to see them fly out of the treasure chest directly into my gold pouch. Now that's a good feeling. As I headed even further into the forest, I came across this random shrine which had an icon resembling farming on it. Right after the shrine was another gold chest. I had also encountered one of the little monsters charging at me. They probably weren't happy that we were now settling on this new island, and I was taking all of their treasure. As I headed back towards the village, I heard barking coming from a tipped over tree. I ended up throwing down a gold coin at it to see what would happen. That was when a dog jumped out and started following me. He followed me all the way back over to the village and looked like he wasn't gonna leave my side. Looks like I got a new companion. Since I found you in the forest, I'll call you Bear. Bear and I headed out to make more improvements around the village together. There wasn't a single thing that he wouldn't come with me to do. We even went into the deep dark forests together. I'm surprised he didn't get scared. Now he's one brave little dog. While exploring, we came across this very magical looking chest. This was a lot different than the coin one. Lo and behold, 3 magical gems had shot right out of the chest, and I picked them up and put them into my gold pouch. I was pretty certain that these were the gems that I could be using on that one random bird that had crashed from the sky. Now this was going to be cool. As I continued exploring, I had also come across this giant rock mine. I invested some resources into it, and we started constructing a new quarry. This way, we would now be able to use stone. That's going to be a lot more overpowered when I have to fight off more of those monster thingies. They won't even make it past our first line of defense if we have full stone walls. That's going to be overpowered. I really wanted to keep exploring further into the forest, but I saw a whole bunch of monsters running my way. Looks like we're done exploring for the day. We gotta get out of here. I had made it back just in the nick of time. It looked like monsters were attacking on both sides of the castle walls, but we had dealt with them very quickly and cleanly. I had also started to upgrade one of the tents into a nice wooden keep. As the morning came around, I headed out and started constructing some more walls and then my very first farm on this new island. I needed to get a stable source of income, and that was one way to do it. The day had went by in the snap of a finger, and there were already enemies attacking my castle walls. There were only 3 of them, and once again, my archers were able to handle them with ease. I really wanted to continue exploring the scenic waterfall area that the monsters scared me away from. So I went there, tossed a gem into the water, and then this giant looking deer hopped out from behind the waterfall. It seemed really friendly, and I'm assuming I could get it as a mount, but I needed to have 3 gold coins. I made my way back over to the village where I ended up collecting coins, and then I invested them into farming so that way we could produce even more gold coins as the time came. When I finally had a spare 3 gold coins, I headed back over to the deer. That was where I was able to tame it, and I could now ride it. This was pretty awesome. It also seemed like it was moving super fast compared to my old horse. Now this is definitely an upgrade. The only downfall about the mount that I noticed was that if I wasn't in a forest, it seemed like the sprint speed was slightly reduced. This honestly didn't bother me that much though, because whenever I would be exploring, it would always be in a forest. So this mount seemed to be perfect. I started upgrading my keep once again, but I didn't have enough gold to do it. That was when the sky randomly started to turn a bit orange. This hadn't happened before, but who knows, maybe it was just the changing of the seasons. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had also upgraded my outer wall to stone. It looked pretty cool, and it now definitely could withstand a whole lot more damage. As things transitioned into the next day, I had a very eerie feeling about it. However, I headed out and started to unlock the shrine that looked like it was used for different farming practices. I had also come across one of the magical gem chests and gotten 2 gems out of it. I started to make my way back towards the castle, and that was when, once again, the sky started to turn orange. But this time, it wasn't a light orange. It was very dark, and it actually became fully red. Things were not looking good. There was definitely something weird going on. I upgraded my keep as I wanted to make the defenses around here a lot more strong. So once I did, all of the walls next to it and towers started to get upgraded to stone. A whole bunch of those tiny monsters had started to attack the right side of my castle. There was one wearing a mask. It looked like that was possibly their leader. He took a lot of arrows, and then finally his mask fell off and he was taken care of. I honestly didn't expect him to withstand so many arrows, but he did. That was a little bit scary. I hope we don't see too many more of those enemies. As the red sky started to fade back into its normal colors as morning approached, we had survived our very first blood moon. I once again had enough gold coins to upgrade the keep, so that's exactly what I did. This time, it was upgraded to stone. Our castle was no longer looking like a little wooden fort, it was now looking like a proper castle with stone walls and a stone keep. We were getting pretty overpowered, and we were able to establish our dominance over this land. I started to devise a plan of training a single knight to lead my archer forces. The Vortian military was getting pretty strong. It wasn't huge, but we definitely were getting pretty powerful. It was time to take things on the offensive. We could maybe attack one of those portals and take it down, causing no more enemies to come through and attack our castle. That seemed like it would be a pretty good idea, just I didn't know how many troops we were going to need to be able to take one of those portals down. I started to upgrade the first stone wall to the second tier stone wall. Once it finished, it was huge and looked like it was able to withstand an insane amount of damage. That got tested out right away as some enemies of the night had made their way over to my castle and started to attack. It seemed like not even a single part of the wall was damaged, and that's how you know we were going to be able to survive in this area for a very long time. Since we had the defenses down and knew that we weren't going to have any issues, I ended up hiring 3 more knights. The reality of fighting back against the monsters was going to become true in the next couple of days. This is going to be awesome. In preparations, I was going to slowly start training some more archers. Also, the further that I expanded my walls to, the easier it would be to send my troops out and attack and have them be able to retreat if need be. I really didn't think this through though. Upgrading the walls right when it turned nighttime was probably the worst decision that I could have made. I had lost at least 4 archers from that mistake. At least now in the future, I'll know not to make it again. I went to go check the other side of my castle and they were holding out pretty well. At least things were going good on this side of the castle. As I continued exploring the forest, I noticed this random dude sitting next to the destroyed ship that I was repairing. It looked like I could give him some of my gems and he would store it away in a chest for me. I then would only have to pay 1 gold coin to redeem them. So in other words, it was like a bank. It was also possible to train pikemen now. This was pretty nice, as I was now able to rely on someone doing melee damage as well as range damage instead of just having only range damage at the walls. One of my outer walls on the left side was only made out of wood. I knew that it wasn't going to be a good idea to try and hold out there, especially from what happened a couple nights ago. I ordered the upgrading of the wooden wall so that way it would disappear and we wouldn't have to hide behind it. The only downfall of this is that the builders would try and upgrade it, but the enemies were coming. I had to tell them to retreat and almost escort them back to the base while dropping some gold coins behind us so the enemies didn't kill any of the builders. The plan ended up working and I was able to keep all of the builders alive. Right at the crack of dawn, I hired 2 more farmers. This way, I would be producing even more gold so I could fund everything that I needed to. I had completely forgot that there was this little house that was sitting inside of our castle walls. I used a magical gem on it, and this lady who looked like a gardener had come out of the little hut. I ended up running over to one of my farms, and I was able to upgrade it to a 3rd tier, which wasn't possible when she wasn't with me. Looks like the farms are going to be a lot more effective now. Having assurance that the economy was going to be stable at this castle, I started to buy pieces for the ship. This way, when the time came, we would be able to sail off whenever we wanted. We wouldn't have to construct it then. Right as the next morning had approached, I had sent out my troops on the right side of the castle to attack the enemy portal. My troops were able to make light work of it, as we were able to take it out without facing any fierce resistance. Right as it collapsed, I was able to go on top of it and order the construction of a new teleportation portal. So now I could teleport to different locations. This definitely seemed like it was going to be way too overpowered. But unfortunately, there was a time limit on how long you could channel the teleportation. So, I ended up running out of time, and I wasn't able to actually teleport. I then didn't have enough gold to try again. This was a little bit frustrating, but I think I had an idea of how this was all going to work out. When I made it back to my castle, we were flourishing in gold coin. The newly upgraded farms were definitely worth the price. The farmers were throwing so much gold to me that I wasn't even able to hold all of it inside of my gold pouch. A lot of gold actually was spewing out of it as I wasn't able to contain it all. Since we had just taken out a portal on the right side of my castle, I figured it would be time to take one out on the left side. So I ordered my troops to go in and start attacking it. Just like at the other portal, a small amount of enemies would make their way out of it and try and attack my troops, who were the ones that were attacking the portal. Once again, we were able to take it out. So I went over the portal remains and started to construct another teleportation portal for me. We'll be coming for you next. Once I returned back to the castle, I was able to load the catapult that I had recently constructed with fire ammunition. This would be super overpowered, especially with large groups of enemies. I sadly didn't get to see the fire shot's effectiveness against the enemies, but I did get to see it get used generally. This would completely block off the enemies from being able to attack my walls. I had headed out with my troops to take out the very last portal on the left side of my castle. I had a great plan of utilizing this dock once we took out the portal, so that way if I ever needed to return to this island, my ship would be able to land safely. But let's focus on our first priority. First, we need to take this portal out. It seemed like there were quite a lot of enemies who were coming out to fight in resistance. I honestly think it could have also been from the wave of enemies that was going to attack my castle anyways, but regardless, we had taken all of them out. Once the portal was destroyed, I started to construct the teleportation portal as well as a lighthouse. This would provide us with visibility on where to land, so that way we wouldn't destroy our ship in the future. I had ended up teleporting all the way back to my castle. Now that was convenient. I then started to put some more money into parts for the ship. I wanted to be able to sail out of here as soon as we destroyed the next portal. So, right as morning came around, I had head over to the right side of the castle and started to invade the enemy portal with my troops. It had also looked like the enemies planned on attacking back. There was quite a lot of them, and I was hoping that my troops would be able to survive this little counterattack. We did. And honestly, I'm glad that we did because that could have gone really bad. We had finally made it over to the portal area and my troops got busy. I myself started heading back to the town to collect more gold and prepare for the next island. My troops were taking a little bit longer than expected, so I headed out to try and go see what was going on. Fortunately enough, I saw them heading back towards the castle, so everything went well. Right as we got the ship up and running, all of my troops and builders had loaded onto it. We had then set sail. I honestly had no idea what to expect at this next island. I'm assuming if I started off the same way that I had done the first two islands, things should go pretty smoothly. But I also didn't know what kind of enemies we'd be fighting in Resistance. One improvement that I did make from the last two islands was that I wasn't going to spend any money on any walls. Because once you upgrade your camp to the 3rd level, all of our loyal people decide to build the walls for free, so we don't have to pay for them. We had gotten things up and running very quickly. I even was taking down some trees already, so that way we could expand the camp even further. I had gotten reports from the local people that there was going to be another blood moon tonight. That meant that we were going to be fighting off some harsh waves of enemies. I knew that I needed to prepare as soon as possible, and the best thing that I could do was probably get up a farm, so that way I would be able to have money to pay for anything that we needed. Unfortunately, the blood moon came a lot quicker than anticipated. Hordes of enemies started to rush my castle walls. Luckily enough, I had brought in over a whole bunch of archers from the last castle. Without them, this raid would have been a lot more intense and probably actually hard. But it wasn't. I was pretty satisfied that I waited for all of the troops to get on the boat instead of leaving early without them. From our previous experiences, I knew that the day after the blood moons were super peaceful. No enemies would attack. So I took advantage of this and started to go and explore, looking for gold chests and gem chests. As I made my way back after exploring, I had stopped in front of a shrine. This one required 3 gems to unlock it and then a whole bunch of gold. But it was definitely worth it as it looked like it made my walls a whole lot stronger. I then upgraded a farm, hired some more farmers, and headed out to the left side forest so that way I could explore and see what was out there. I ended up coming across a tombstone that was pretty spooky and a horse that was armored. That was when I bumped into a gem chest. As I explored further, I had found even another gem chest, which had dropped 3 gems. I was really loaded with gems. Literally, my whole gold pouch was filled with gems. Once I had scouted all the way to the dock, I made my way back over to the tombstone. I used 2 gems to activate it. The armored horse mount was now able to be used. This was pretty cool, but I still liked my deer over it. As the night progressed, I had upgraded my camp into a wooden keep, and I watched my soldiers fight off the little monsters. I wonder what makes these things so vicious. It was honestly kind of hard to believe that we were already at the 3rd island. 3 islands is quite a lot, so that means we have 3 castles already established in this realm. We were making really good progress, and the dynasty was lasting for quite some time. Pointy had reappeared, telling me to follow him. So, of course, I did. He wanted me to upgrade the farm that we had, which made a lot of sense. So, I listened to him. It was pretty nice that he just appeared to remind me of that, because it definitely was going to make things a lot easier as I needed more money. Despite having just landed at this island not too long ago, the invasions at nighttime were getting pretty intense. There was quite a significant amount of troops, and a lot of them had masks on. This meant that they had a lot of extra health. The days really started to feel like they were flying by. Most of them consisted of surviving the night and then going around and making upgrades in preparation for the next night that was yet to come. Even though it seemed like there wasn't too much getting done besides fighting off enemies and a few things here and there, we were pretty much speedrunning what we were doing on the other 2 islands. It was only a few days in now, and we already had a stable income, as well as an upgraded stone keep. There honestly wasn't anything to complain about. While I was riding by, I had noticed there was another horse mount that I could potentially tame. I had given it 1 gem and then realized it needed 4 gold pieces. I honestly thought it was going to be the same as the deer and only cost 3, but that wasn't the case. I ended up just continuing what I was doing and figured that I would come back for it later. This castle was already at the point to where we could start attacking some of the enemy portals. So I headed over to my keep and started training some knights. I trained 2 of them on the left side of the castle and also got a few more archers. Then, after we had fought off all of the invading monsters, my troops rallied and we headed directly to the portal. My troops really didn't have a far run because I had expanded my castle all the way up until the last point that you could before arriving at the portal. Attack! As usual, my troops got busy. Arrows were flying directly at the portal and pieces of it were falling to the ground. The enemies also were trying to put up a harsh resistance, but they didn't do a very good job. Once it was destroyed and all of my troops had returned back to the castle, a retaliation wave of enemies had made their way over. On top of that, it was also nighttime, so more enemies had come on the other side of the castle. That's 2 attacks in one day. A little bit unexpected, but nothing we couldn't handle. I launched another invasion on the next portal on the left-hand side. Since we had 3 different knights, I was able to send 3 groups of troops out at the same exact time. Also, on the right-hand side, I did the same thing. So we were destroying portals on both sides of the castle. Now that's what I call efficient. While the retaliation attacks were happening, I headed over to go ahead and build one of the teleportation portals. I mean, we did just destroy them, might as well take advantage and use them as soon as possible. Speaking about taking advantage, I was utilizing my farms to the fullest extent. Every time that I would walk by one, I would get an insane amount of gold coins. Geez, even after collecting my coins, I got more. So what do you do when you have a whole bunch of gold pieces and a good economy? Obviously, you keep investing into it. So that's exactly what I did. The second I had enough gold coins, I went over to one of my tier 2 farms and upgraded it to a tier 3 one. With the help of my little farmer, of course. I started to plan something pretty risky. Even though it was a blood moon, I had sent my troops out to go and take out the last portal on the left side of my castle. I wasn't going to let them do it alone, so of course I marched over to it with them. Right when we arrived, my troops got to work. They started pelting the portal with a whole bunch of arrows. It seemed like they really had everything under control on that side of the castle. So I went to go see what was going on the right side. What the heck is that thing? The walls have been breached, retreat! Things were not going good. I needed to quickly come up with a plan to make sure that I would be able to kill that giant monster. So I did what made sense and started training a whole bunch of archers. Everybody started to chip in as they threw any gold coins that they had right into my pouch. That way I was able to afford to purchase more archers so we could defend the castle walls. Alright boys, here goes nothing, give it your all. The enemy monsters had made it to our 3rd line of defense. Thankfully enough, I trained so many troops that we were able to just barely survive. Well, that was scary. Time to rebuild. As the walls were being restored back to normal, something strange started to happen. It began to snow. As festive as this may seem, it really wasn't a good thing. I wasn't 100% sure if I would be able to harvest vegetables during the winter. Probably not. I had also let my curiosity get the best of me. While I was collecting gold coins, I mounted up one of the new horses I had unlocked. I just wanted to see how things would go, and honestly, it wasn't really the best mount. It was pretty slow. So once I dealt with a full knight's invasion, I had head back to the lighthouse and upgraded it, and then switched back to my deer mount. Things were going so smoothly that night after night had kept on flying by, and for most of those nights, I couldn't even hear when our castle was being attacked. That's how safe and secure our kingdom was becoming. I was even able to expand our towers and walls right before the enemy portal. Now this was a very good strategy in my opinion, because if we were able to just launch our attack and not have to run halfway across the map, that would be pretty ideal, and we could also retreat if need be. Even though it kind of just defeated the purpose of building that tower and wall, I had sent out my troops to attack the portal. Despite getting heavy resistance from the enemies, we had lost none of our own. It also appeared that the knights had leveled up the longer that they survived and the more enemies that they took out. So the longer that they stayed alive, the more powerful they became. I went to go scout out the next portal that we would be taking on. It's almost like the enemies knew that I was approaching, and of course a bunch of them jumped out of the portal and tried to attack me. I had to retreat back to the castle, and when I arrived, I saw wooden walls. I didn't really think much of it, but I forgot that I had told my troops to expand. This was an issue because I didn't tell them to upgrade though. So once they made it to the edge of the wall to defend against the enemies, the monsters had broken through and immediately started taking out a whole bunch of my troops. Not very many of them survived. There were, however, still a few. Also, it looked like the enemies were more interested in stealing my supplies and loot that they had gotten off my soldiers. There were only 2 monsters that actually came and started to attack my walls. After a night like that, I needed more archers, so all of my gold went to training more. I even needed to withdraw some from my castle treasury. This wasn't ideal, but I needed at least 1 night to launch invasion. It appeared that my farmers had stopped harvesting crops and started picking berries instead. So while I was collecting coins from them, this giant boar around a bunch of baby boars started to charge me. I guess I was technically in their territory, but man, this thing wanted revenge. I had a whole army of troops, and they had all been knocked out by this mama boar. She was practically terrorizing my village at this point, and that was when she had knocked the crown off of my head. This was too far. Oh, I will be back, and I will deal with you. Luckily, for the boars, an invasion had began on the right side of my castle, so I had to go and monitor it because I wanted to make sure that all the troops that I had trained were enough to defend the castle. Things went alright, no damage was done. You would have thought that I would have learned from the first few times, but I overextended my walls again. I was so used to having so many gold coins that I could build a wall and immediately upgrade it to stone. That wasn't the case anymore. Winter was really taking a toll on our economy. We didn't have a lot of coins left. And sure enough, the monsters had taken out almost all of my troops once again. The struggle was real. I did end up rebuilding the same wall that had been taken down, but this time I made sure I got it to stone before the end of the night. This time you guys aren't getting in. Oh wait, actually you might. That's a lot of you. Retreat! They're breaking the wall! The monsters had made it in through the first layer of my wall. We had retreated to my second, less sturdy wooden walls. Some of my troops did get taken out, but fortunately, it was the end of the raid. So, we didn't lose too much, but it was sad to see some of the soldiers that I had just trained not survive. I then decided it was a good time to pay a visit to one of my boar friends. I had thrown a coin into the bush, and then she started to charge the walls of my castle. She hit her head right onto the castle wall, then my archers shot their arrows directly at her. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take the boar down. Well, this should have been done a long time ago. As I attempted taking out the boar one more time, the same outcome had occurred. On top of being unsuccessful in taking out that pest, it was also the night of a blood moon. That meant that there were going to be a whole bunch of enemies attacking my castle walls. I wonder if we're going to see any of those special monsters again. Oh, I just had to ask. I made sure that my catapults were firing away at the giant monster. It threw a rock back right over the walls and almost directly into the people who were manning my catapult. The rock wasn't effective, and we were able to keep pelting this big thing with a whole bunch of arrows. Finally, it was taken care of, and we had survived the night. Okay, this is my final attempt, I promise. I tried to take care of the boar one last time, and yes, this time I mean it. We were pelting it with a lot of arrows, and once again, it just yelled at us and then ran the other way. Alright, I give up. Let's focus on something that's actually important now, like rebuilding this ship, or even hiring new farmers. Winter had just ended, and it was time to start making a lot of gold again. Since we could now get our economy back up and running, it was now time to prepare an army again. Once the Vortian army was restored to its former glory, I had sent them out to go and take out the next portal on the right-hand side. There were only 2 left, and we were almost halfway done taking out this one. I planned on sending my troops right back out after dealing with the retaliation wave that I knew for a fact the monsters were going to send out. I made my way over to the final portal, and that was when I saw the monsters start spewing out of it. This really disgusting looking flying monster had emerged out of the portal with all of the usual little small guys. I wasn't really familiar with these kind of monsters, and we had never really seen them before this point. However, they looked like they were going to be pretty effective at taking out my troops. There wasn't a barrier to prevent the flying monsters from getting access to my archers. That's what made them so dangerous. It's also why my soldiers seemed to focus on taking them out first. Things were getting tense. The monsters had almost destroyed my wall completely, and this was a fully upgraded stone wall. Once they did, they immediately started taking out some troops on the back of our retreat line. I really don't know what was going on. Things were honestly taking a turn for the worst. It seemed like every other second something was going wrong, and there was nothing that I could really do about it besides collecting more gold and upgrading our defenses even more. I also needed to get a final attack going on that very last portal, so that's exactly what I did. I had my troops trained and then sent out. We had arrived at the spooky portal at the dead of night, and one of my knights had been taken out almost instantly, so a bunch of the archers had to pull back. I then also decided that it would be best to retreat and rebuild my forces to come back later. Hope was lost on that invasion. It also made sense to finally follow through on what my plan was earlier. Build the walls as close as I could get them to the portal, and then launch my attacks out of the conquered land. My great plan has begun, as I started to construct a wall and remove even more tree. Sure enough, the monsters weren't going to let us do this without resistance. So, a huge swarm of enemy forces had made their way over to my castle walls. Luckily enough, we survived the invasion. But something worse had happened. Something that I would have never dreamed about in 1,000 years. It all happened because I was feeling lazy, and I wanted to use the portal to teleport back into my town. But I didn't know where to teleport to, and I also wanted to see what was going on. So while I was looking through the lenses of the teleportation portal, I had been jumped by an enemy. They hit me, and my crown had gone flying off into the distance, and that was when the teleportation portal actually teleported me. My crown was gone, which meant that I could no longer be the king of this kingdom. This is the story of how I, Noah of the Vortide family, had lost the crown. And that's where I come in. Joshua, son of Noah, heir to the Vortian kingdom. Rumor has it that after my father lost his crown, the monsters had rallied up and taken out all 3 of our castles on each island. Thankfully enough, it looks like some people had survived, and they were able to keep the keep intact on the first island. To represent my family bloodline, we had chosen the colors of green, white, and black. To stand out from my father's flag, I used a dragon instead of a bear, and my dragon was white while his bear was brown. My first order of action was to get the walls back up and running, as well as the economy. Since a lot of the farms were still standing, I just needed to expand my lands a little bit until I could start hiring farmers. And this wasn't that hard to do. We had almost gotten the whole job done within a day. 2 of my farms were now reactive. Well, that didn't take long at all. I continued to expand my walls as far as I could. I wanted to make sure that every single farm was encapsulated by them. I had also started to upgrade my keep. This was necessary because I needed to take out the 2 portals that were still on this first island. We hadn't discovered stone technology until the second island, so I wasn't able to take out the enemy portals, at least until now. We are now 1 step closer. Time to start getting an army going. As I waited for my farms to gather as much food as they could so it could be sold for coins, I had a great idea. I went over to the magical chest guy where I got my magical gems. That was when I went back to the bird that had crash landed. I had used the 2 gems to try and tame the bird. Unfortunately, it looked like it needed 8 more coins. So, I knew I would wait until I had enough, and I would come back. Well, that will do it. After making quite a few base improvements that I honestly didn't even need to make because there were only 3 monsters attacking me at a time, I started to head back out to go and tame the griffin. Once I arrived, it seemed like it didn't have much interest in me. That was until it got near the tree. I think it honestly didn't remember me until it saw me in the exact spot that I had saved it. So, I tamed it, and it would now let me ride it. This thing was awesome. I could even tell it to clap its 2 wings together, creating a huge burst of wind. Now this could really be overpowered, especially if there were a lot of enemies that were charging at me. I had also noticed that the griffin seemed like it would feed absolutely anywhere. It would grab worms out of the ground whenever I would stop, so I didn't have to worry about only eating at grass areas. I returned back to the castle with my new mount. Once there, I started to collect all of the gold coins that the farmers were throwing at me. There were so many that my whole gold pouch was completely filled. It seemed like every time that I had a full pouch of gold, time would just start to fly by. I was making upgrade after upgrade inside of the base. I had also started to reconstruct the ship that my father once sailed before me. Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the items that required gems never got activated on this first island. So I went around activating absolutely everything I could. One of the first things I activated was a shrine, which seemed like it would increase my archer's effectiveness and maybe even damage. I wish I had that earlier. With my new archer buff, I knew that it was time to send out my troops. We started attacking the portal that was on the dock. We had taken it out fairly quickly, but I didn't bring enough coins to build both the lighthouse and the transportation portal. As I returned back to my castle, I had realized that the retaliation wave was going on. There were quite a lot of enemies, 2 flying ones, a giant monster one, and all the small little guys. This was intimidating because we had just reconstructed this castle. I really didn't want to see it fall so soon. One of the flying monsters had made its way over my walls and inward towards my keep. I didn't know if there were going to be any archers in the archer towers to take care of it. So I went back to check on the large monster, and once it was killed, I headed back over to see what happened to the flying one. Thankfully enough, we didn't take too many losses from the night, so I was able to go into the next day not worrying about building up the army. I was able to focus on constructing the boat and then going back to the lighthouse and portal so I could finally build them. The enemy attacks continued on, but so did ours. The final invasion on this island was launched. We were able to take out the portal in a matter of seconds. It really wasn't that hard. Strangely enough, after the portal was destroyed, I couldn't build a transportation portal on it. But a giant rock did slam into the side of the cliff. Very majestic. As I made my way back towards the castle, I had rung the bell to get everybody on the ship. Now that we had taken care of all of the enemies on this island, it made sense to travel to the next one. On to island number 2. Right as I arrived on the island, I wasted no time at all. I immediately activated the farming shrine, and then paid a visit to my favorite farmer. I then made my way over to make sure all the portals were destroyed on my island. That was when I sailed to Island 3. Once I knocked on the door of one of the hermits, Pointy had immediately made his way over to me. It looked like he was trying to instruct me to do something. He told me to follow him, and when I did, he brought me back to the castle where I was greeted with a whole bunch of coins. I honestly couldn't figure out what Pointy wanted me to do. So I just did my usual check of going to the end of the island to find out if any portal still existed on it. There was still one, so I unleashed the might of the Vortian army directly upon it. With absolutely no hesitation at all, my 3 squads of knights and archers had made their way over to the large and creepy portal. Light work as usual. Once the portal was taken out, I headed directly to the boat and then sailed to the next island. I didn't want to waste any time at all. This was the first island that we arrived at that my father had not been to. So I headed directly to the center and started to build my little camps. I followed in his footsteps and followed the same exact strategy that he used, by trying to get up my town hall as quick as possible. After getting a stable camp set up, I had headed out to see what the island had to offer. The first thing that I had came across was a gem chest. I then headed back to my camp as it was already time for the invasion. There were only 2 enemy monsters that attacked, so this wasn't bad. They didn't really know that we were on this island yet. I secured my walls to the next wood level and then headed out, finding this really cool copper looking factory. I knew that I was going to be able to get copper walls if I had unlocked this. I made it my main goal to save up enough coins to be able to unlock copper working. I was able to grab 1 more gem chest, and then I came across the second portal that was on the left hand side of my castle. I didn't want to keep going any further and get caught by enemies, so I headed back to the castle. It was pretty interesting because that same night I had taken out a small little detachment of enemy monsters, while on the next night there was a whole lot more of them. I really couldn't figure out their battle plans, or if they even had any. Were they really just mindless monsters, or did they actually have a plan after all? Who knows? I decided to go and explore the forest to the right side of my castle. That was when I came across a waterfall that had an egg behind it. The second that I deactivated the waterfall with 3 gems, the egg hatched, and a little reptilian monster had come out of it. Sadly enough, I didn't want to spend any gold coins on this mount if I didn't have to. I ended up leaving it so I could go back to my castle. Trust me, that wasn't going to be the last that we see of it. When I got the opportunity to, I upgraded my farm to tier 3. I then upgraded my keep to stone. After some time, the lizard that I had hatched earlier had made its way over to my base. I decided to give it a chance and mounted it. It was pretty cool because I was able to shoot fire out of its mouth, and it kind of created like a little fire pit that nobody would be able to walk in. Now that's pretty overpowered if you ask me. I'm not gonna lie, taming this lizard was probably the best decision that I could have made. It was the night of a blood moon, and there was an insane amount of enemies. I had even gone a little bit too far outside of my walls that my crown had gone flying. The fire pit really helped out a lot, as my troops were completely overrun by all of the enemies. I even almost died. I made the right move by having my mount spit out a puddle of fire. A lot of the enemies burned up because of it, and it made defending the castle a little bit easier. I didn't really notice it, but there were a whole bunch of giant enemies smacking away at my castle walls. Unfortunately, only 1 wall stood between me and the giant monsters, and they were spawning in a whole bunch of the little guys like crazy. I honestly didn't have much hope that we were going to be able to hold off against all of the enemies that remained. The walls collapsed! The 3 large giants had made their way into my castle. The final right-hand side wall was completely destroyed. I honestly wasn't sure what to do. I was afraid they were going to destroy my keep, but it looked like they weren't even that interested in my keep. They were more interested in trying to kill me. I'm assuming it was the crown. They wanted to take my crown like they had taken my father's. I wasn't going to let this happen. So I pulled a 200 IQ move. I ran behind the walls that were on the left side of my castle. That way, there would be an object between me and these giants. This was definitely a very costly move, and it was sad that I had to do it, as I had lost a lot of troops because of it. But I wasn't going to let the whole dynasty just die right here. So I went behind the 1 wall that remained and started shooting fire at the giant monsters. They had broken their way through the wall with ease. This was it. My life flashed before me. My only hope was to keep shooting puddles of fire down at their feet while they tried to attack me. I would have to dodge their attacks. I even tried to run past them, but they had completely blocked me off and I wasn't able to squeeze through. My last resort was to keep shooting fire at them all the way until we got to the edge of the map. So that was what I committed to. I kept shooting as much fire as I could. And finally, they had all burned up. I was super relieved, as this branch of the Vortide family could have been ended right there and then. It wasn't though. And all I have to say is thank God for this mount. The number 1 thing that I had to do after we had recuperated was to re-recruit all of the villagers that we had lost. I didn't have enough coins to get all of them at once, so slowly over time, I had built up my population. I think that was the most effective attack that the monsters had ever thrown at us. It was funny going from almost dying to them to seeing them throw waves of enemies at us with only 5 or 6 little monsters. This just made absolutely no sense to me, but I guess they didn't really have a lot of power when it wasn't a blood moon. I honestly needed to prepare for the next one. I didn't know when it would be, but I knew that it was coming up sometime soon. So upgrading every single wall to the max level it could be was a necessity. I had also realized that I didn't unlock copper yet. That harsh invasion had made me completely forget about it, and it wasn't even in my main goal list. Rebuilding the economy and kingdom was. But I knew that it was going to come soon. I was going to be able to get my copper walls and my copper keep very, very soon. I had gotten some bad news that another blood moon was going to happen in the next couple of nights. So I mentally braced for what was yet to come. When it did actually happen, no enemies even attacked my castle. Or at least such a small amount of them did that I didn't even notice we were under attack. I wasn't going to complain about this at all though. It meant that we were guaranteed a safe night for the next one. This was super relieving because I didn't have to actually worry about that blood moon at all. It went by like it was nothing, and I also didn't have to worry about enemies attacking my castle for another night. Due to having 2 peaceful nights in a row, I was able to head over to the copper mine and start production, so we would now be able to build copper buildings and towers. This was going to help us out so much with our defenses. Ah, what a beauty. I wanted to make upgrades to my castle the second that I had gotten home. The only issue was we were under attack, so I couldn't really upgrade the walls until after the attack. While the builders did their thing, I followed Pointy as he appeared out of nowhere. He told me to give some of my coins to the treasurer so that way I could store them for later. The copper walls had finished building. I ran right past them as I felt safe entering my castle. This sense of safety was about to be followed by a sense of luxury. I had started to upgrade my keep to copper. Now that's epic. My keep had finished upgrading, and my towers and walls right outside of my keep were also being upgraded. Now this is going to be a huge upgrade for the kingdom. The recent discovery of iron made me feel confident. It was a much stronger material, which made our walls a lot more sturdy. Well, since we have upgraded defenses, we might as well test them out. I sent my 2 squads of knights over to the nearest portal to try and trigger a war. Every time that I had my knights destroy one of these, a whole bunch of monsters attacked back in retaliation. Little did they know, that's exactly what I wanted, to test out my defenses. Well, at least that's what I thought I wanted. Sometimes you gotta be careful for what you wish for. The reason being is that I went over to the right side of my castle to recruit some more citizens. I then trained them into archers, but by the time I returned back to the left side of the castle, my outermost iron wall was gone. I was completely drained of the confidence that I had in the iron walls just a minute earlier. Maybe they're not as strong as I thought. I guess we'll just have to find out and build some more. Since I had just taken out one of the portals, I wanted to build my own over it. The only issue is, I didn't have enough coins to do that. So I ended up heading back into my castle, looking for the farms. When I arrived at the first one, my farmers didn't have any coins to offer. However, the second one had a plentiful amount of coins. I'm not gonna lie, I'm starting to like this farm a bit better. Instead of heading back to the potential portal location, I ended up upgrading one of my stone walls. It seemed like the right thing to do. Having more defense was more important than having a short teleport. Right as the upgrade finished, I noticed that my citizens automatically built a blacksmith. This meant that I could now upgrade my squires into full knights. Look, here comes one now. I followed the squire and his squad back to the blacksmith. That was when I knighted the squire into our very first full knight. It looks like attacking those mysterious portals just got a whole lot easier, especially if we get more knights in the kingdom. You know what they say, a good defense is a good offense. I really took this saying to heart as I upgraded another one of my walls. I could have easily spent my gold on upgrading another squire to knight, but I knew that the monsters were going to continue to get more relentless. That meant the more iron walls, the better. I randomly noticed there was an extra tower that looked a little bit different than my walls. Well, what do you know? After dumping some coins into it, I figured out it could hold yet another squire or knight. I wonder how many of these knight towers I can get. In hopes of being able to build more, I started to expand my walls on the right side of the castle. I had also cleared out a few trees. That was when I made my way over to a nearby camp to recruit more citizens to join the kingdom. After all of this running around and building, I had finally started to take a nice little stroll past one of my farms. That was when the farmer started to shower me with coins. It just so happens that this farm is right next to the washed up boat. So I had gotten the idea to rebuild the boat using all of the coins that the farmers had just given me. Even though I really didn't need to build the boat yet, I was thinking of it as kind of more of an escape plan. If the castle ever gets overrun, I could just hop on the boat and sail to the next island. Having multiple iron walls and an escape plan, I decided that it was time to send my troops out to take on the next portal. Unfortunately enough, I didn't have enough gold coins to send out all 3 squads of soldiers. I ended up having to run back into the village, get at least 4 coins from one of my farms, and then finally send out the last squad of troops. Everything seemed like it was going okay though. The 2 squads of my soldiers were already taking out the portal. By the time the 3rd group had arrived, it was pretty much destroyed, and the 3rd group didn't have to do anything. Get back to the base, it's time for the counterattack. As I prepared my defenses, I saw some arrows being shot off. I didn't know what side the assault was going to be coming from, but it ended up just being a rabbit. Who would have thought that a rabbit could be such a troll? After being fooled by that rabbit, I headed over to my stables. I knew that this assault was going to be brutal, so I mounted up my lizard. Since he could shoot fire out of his mouth, it seemed like the appropriate mount to use while defending against the monsters. After scouting out both sides of the castle on my lizard mount that I ended up naming Jojo, I saw that some of the walls were destroyed on the right side. After taking a few more steps, I saw that there were a whole bunch of those little scary monsters running directly at me. There also happened to be those giant monsters that spawned the smaller ones right behind them. Things were not looking good, especially since we were down 1 iron wall. The giant brute-like enemies started to pound on my next defensive wall. I made my mount shoot as much fire as it possibly could right down in front of them. The few archers that were still alive also tried to take out these giant enemies, but it seemed like it was no hope. They were making such great strides while trying to take over our base. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Right as it seemed like there was no chance of survival, I got a little glimpse of hope. One of the bigger brute monsters had collapsed and was defeated. This must have meant that the other giant monsters were probably low on health. They wouldn't be lasting for much longer, especially if I kept hitting them with fire. It was only a matter of time before the giants made their way over to my last wall defending the right side of my castle. I bombarded them with as much fire that I could. Oh no, they broke through! After destroying the wall, they had marched their way directly towards my keep. Every single villager and farmer that was in their way had been completely knocked out, and their tools dropped. I started to retreat towards the first wall on the left side of my castle. While heading there, I dropped fire pits along the way, so that way the giant brutes would have to be set on fire while they make their way towards the next wall. What I was desperately hoping for had finally happened. All of the giant monsters attacking my castle had been burned up to a shrivel. We did it! We survived the attack! Honestly, that was one of the most intense invasions yet. If my father Noah could see this, he would be so proud of me. Despite having a grand victory, I didn't have time to celebrate. I needed to get my walls back up and running, especially if there was going to be another invasion sometime soon. I just knew that I shouldn't attack any of the portals until everything was fixed. I knew that this was going to be a challenge and take a couple of days, but I needed to commit to it. I first focused on rebuilding 2 of the walls closest to the right side of my castle. I then focused on hiring more farmers and upgrading the walls every single time they had put out some coins. All of this was going on while I was also fighting off the invasions of the little creepy monsters. It had been around 2 days since the big invasion. Finally, things were starting to look a little bit normal again. I still had to fix a few more walls though. It never hurts to have more farmers. That last invasion really scarred me. Every time that the monsters started to head towards my castle, I hopped on my Mount Jojo. I did this in precaution just in case a huge group of enemies was heading towards my castle. I was super proud of all of my citizens and myself, as we were able to make great progress rebuilding the kingdom and also getting the economy back up and running in only a few days. I finally was starting to feel a bit safe again. The second that I was able to build a catapult for the right side of my castle, I did. This was probably the smartest decision that I could have made, because it was the night of a blood moon. That meant that enemies were going to be sending another heavy wave of troops. This time, things were going to be different though. I made sure to scout out to figure out which side the enemies were going to be coming from. I had also prepared defenses for both sides just in case there were attacks on the right and left. I was very satisfied with myself as I had prepared my catapult to shoot some fire shots. I was also spitting fire on the ground. This was the same exact strategy that I used to survive a couple nights ago. And surely we would prevail again, especially since I was more prepared this time. Luckily enough, the monsters weren't even able to destroy my first wall. We were able to defeat them without any losses. Now that's what I call a victory in my book. This successful defense meant that we were going to get a day of peace. I didn't have to worry about protecting the kingdom for one night. Now that's quite the gift. I can't complain about a good night's sleep. That's exactly what I got. I didn't have to worry about any monsters for that night. However, on the next day, I had sent my troops out to go and attack the next portal. I honestly wasn't ready for the retaliation attack that's going to come from destroying this portal, but I needed to make sure that we were always progressing. So I ended up having my soldiers destroy it. I knew that I needed to get back to the base as soon as possible in order to prepare for what was to come. I came up with a great idea of using one of the teleportation portals to scout out where the enemies were at. Once I found them, I had teleported to the wall that they were attacking. I then started spewing as much fire as I possibly could at them. I rightfully felt very confident about this attack. Without a doubt, we had taken out the enemy monsters and secured the kingdom for another night. This just meant that I now needed to take out another portal on the right side, which I imagined would be the last one on that side. I had realized that I didn't finish off repairing the boat. This could have been chaotic, especially if I needed it to escape. I then made my way over to the left side of the castle to see how many portals were on that side. I ended up coming across this random cave that required 3 gems to activate. Luckily enough, a little bit further past the cave, I had found a gem box. What a coincidence. When I activated the cave, a bear had come crawling out of it. It looked like this could be another mount. Unfortunately enough, I wasn't able to check though. The mysterious portal activated and I knew some of those little monsters would come running out of it. So I had to get out of there and return back to my castle. That was where I came across the bear that I had just awoken. Surprisingly enough, it had come over to my stables and started to hang out there. I figured that I might as well test the mount out and give it a name. Since the first activity I did on it was tell my farmers to collect a berry bush, I decided to name him Berry. Berry was definitely a good mount, and you could charge with him to knock over enemies, but I definitely liked my Griffin more. He just felt a lot faster than all of the other mounts that I had. Well, it looks like it's that time again. I hope everybody's ready for another invasion. As I marched my troops to the next portal, a mama boar came out of nowhere and started to attack my troops. She was pretty powerful, but we outnumbered her by a lot. A good majority of my troops did get taken out, but once she was defeated, she dropped a significant amount of coins. Now that's what I call revenge for earlier. Once my troops had finally made it to the portal, it looked like there weren't a lot of them left. I had 2 knights and roughly 3 or 4 archers. I knew that we wouldn't be able to defeat this portal with such a small amount of troops. So the second that it had turned nighttime and more enemies were spawning from the portal, I had to retreat. Once I made it back to the keep, I started recruiting some more farmers and troops. I then sent out the new squads of soldiers to take out the portal. In a matter of minutes, the portal had collapsed. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough coins to reconstruct my own teleportation portal over it, so I settled for building a wooden lighthouse. Immediately right as I made it back to my castle, the enemy monsters were already attacking. It looked like there was an insane amount of them, more than we've ever seen before. So I just started to use my usual strategy to try and take them out. Our first wall had been breached. I wanted to make sure that I covered my troops' retreat. It looked like there was quite a distance until the next innermost wall. My troops successfully made it behind the iron wall, and so did I. That was when we started barraging them with arrows and fire. After what seemed like forever, the monsters had dropped dead. This was a great feeling because I didn't have to worry about the right side of my castle anymore. No more monsters could spawn there. Also, having a newly constructed lighthouse gave me relief. I knew that I could dock a ship here in case I needed to come back. I even returned to the lighthouse location so I could upgrade it to stone, and also build that portal that I was never able to construct. It seemed like at this point, big invasions against the castle weren't really a big deal. My troops were very well trained, and the castle walls were all iron. Now the only thing left to do was to upgrade my archer towers and train more fool knights. The boat was also almost fully constructed. Now that's good progress. The winter had finally ended. However, we still couldn't utilize our farms. I still had to have the farmers pick the berry bushes. Well, since it's a new season, we might as well take down another portal. That is exactly what I ordered my troops to do. And within a matter of minutes, they had taken down the portal and we were already constructing our own over it. The enemy monsters wasted no time at all to retaliate. There were flying ones, a whole bunch of the smaller little monsters, and an insane amount of the giant brute ones. The flying monsters made it pretty far into my base, but after a while they were taken out. At this point, we just needed to take out the small monsters and giants. I also wasn't really paying attention, but this one very athletic, creepy looking monster had jumped right over the walls. They knocked my crown off. Thankfully enough, I was able to recover it without it being stolen. Right as I got my crown back, the enemies had breached the first iron wall. I covered my troops' retreat with fire, my usual tactic. The enemy brutes made it to the wall, but after a couple of punches, they had burnt up. Well, that's another successful defense. It was very strange, but for some reason, it started snowing again. We had just survived the winter season, so I was a little bit confused on why we were getting such weird weather. I guess I can't really argue with the weather. Looks like we're gonna have to survive another winter. This really wasn't concerning because I had quite a lot of coins. I even was able to spend some on a giant bomb. It only made sense that we started bringing the attacks into the enemy lands, especially since there really was only one portal left. The timing for my attack with the giant bomb wasn't very good. It looked like the enemies had sent out a huge barrage of troops to come and attack us this night. So my troops tried to hold them off, but they weren't able to successfully. I had to retreat back to the castle. Once I had made it back, I noticed that the bomb had only reached the castle walls. Man, that thing moved slowly. I ended up spending the next day rebuilding my army, getting ready for the attack. I had also accidentally moved my bomb outside of the castle. Unfortunately, it couldn't be moved back. Sure enough, right as night came around, when the enemies attacked us, I was afraid that they were going to be able to gain possession of it and use it against our castle walls. Luckily enough, they didn't. However, the next night was a blood moon. This meant that the attack was going to be extra strong. There goes 20 coins. Since my bomb and troops had been defeated, I had no idea how I was going to defend against this blood moon. Luckily enough, it seemed like there was only 2 giant monsters that were a part of the raid. So my defenses were sufficient. I headed out on the left side of my castle to find spots to build archer towers. As I was out, I noticed that there was a portal that I thought was destroyed. There were only 2 logical explanations for this. My troops never got the job done, or the monsters had built yet another portal. With either explanation, I was disappointed. I had really thought we would be able to utilize that giant bomb, but apparently not. Due to these complications, my goals had changed. I now had to make sure that I destroyed another portal before buying one of those bombs again. It also just made sense to expand my castle walls. If my troops were able to start a lot closer to the portal that was so far away, it would make things a lot easier. My soldiers also wouldn't have to march so far and possibly get caught during nighttime in another enemy raid. So this just made things a whole lot more safe. Also, go check out my merch store, linked down below. I sent a little detachment of troops to go over and take care of the portal. It broke really quickly, and then we had our resistance attack. The enemies really didn't throw anything at us that was out of the ordinary. It was very brutal, like it always is, but we survived. Now the only thing left to do was to survive and build up my army as big as I could get it. When the time was right, I led my troops in a march towards the very last portal on the island. We had arrived there, and I entered the portal with all of my troops behind me. We were immediately met with action right when we made it inside of the portal. This really weird looking pump system had started producing those little monsters we were fighting off for the longest time. So that's where they came from. After we destroyed the first one, we moved on to the second one. I honestly didn't know how many of these we were gonna have to destroy. But if it prevented those little monsters from being on this island, I was down to destroy at least 100 if I had to. We ended up destroying 3, and then 4, and then finally coming across this random river looking thing that was dropping out a whole bunch of enemies. I had lit the bomb and started to run towards the entrance. I noticed that my soldiers were pretty slow. I tried waiting up for them and helping them escape as the monsters were on their tail. I even tried dropping a whole bunch of coins behind them to distract those little vicious things with money over killing my troop. This unfortunately didn't work. And then when I tried to run to the entrance as it seemed like the bomb was going to explode, my griffin was out of energy. Things were not looking good. The Vortian people celebrated as they saw huge explosions coming from the cliffside. A whole bunch of goo had flown out of it, and it looked like the monsters had been completely defeated. The only question is, where is the king? My father, King Joshua, had not survived the explosion. He had died taking out the vicious monster factory on the 4th island. I, King Charles, son of King Joshua, inherited the crown. It was my birthright to finish off what my father started. He had destroyed one of the many factories that the monsters had on these islands. I needed to finish the job and get rid of them all. I definitely had one advantage that my father and grandfather didn't. I knew these islands like the back of my hand. While my family was ruling, me and my brother Andrew were exploring these islands and learning about them as much as we possibly could. My first official actions as the new king was to get the first island's economy back up and running. I knew that there was still one of the evil monster factories on this island, so I had to make sure that I disposed of it. But first things first, I had to get the economy back up and running. I ended up recruiting as many farmers as I could afford. I then activated the archer shrine to get more damage from my archer units. I then made my way over to the griffin crash site, as all of my family before me had gotten their own griffins. It was my time to get my own. I had immediately helped it out right as it crashed and then mounted him. Since I was near the cave, I decided to go and check it out. This thing's gonna be destroyed in only a matter of days. I swear it. I checked out the lighthouse to make sure that it was still burning. If I ever wanted to land my ship here, I needed to make sure this thing was still active. Once I arrived, I even upgraded it to iron, so it would last for much longer than the stone one would. I had also started to upgrade the keep to iron. This was going to be the only way that I could have people produce the bomb to take out the mountain cliff monster maker. I ended up spending days and days to build up an army big enough to complete my objective. When the time was right and the bomb was constructed, I started the march on that enemy factory. As soon as we arrived, I ordered my troops to go in with me. We came across one of those weird pump systems and took it out as quickly as possible. We then were already at the bomb site. There was only one of those pump systems that I had heard rumors about. I lit the bomb and started to sprint my way out of the cave. I didn't wait up for any of the soldiers because I knew that they would be able to get out themselves. I also didn't want to have to put the kingdom through losing yet another king, especially so quickly. The kingdom was now secured on Island 1 thanks to me, and Island 4 thanks to my father. This was only going to be the beginning of my destruction of these enemy monsters. They needed to be wiped out. Instead of leaving the island right away, I made my way back to the castle and tried upgrading any remaining knights and recruited as many archers as I possibly could. I then loaded them onto the boat to move on to Island 2 and started my sail as we needed to get there as soon as possible to take out the monster factory. Right as the boat had dropped us off, I immediately upgraded the lighthouse on the second island. I then made my way over to the farming shrine, which I activated, and also went to go knock on the hermit's door, one of our family friends. As usual, I started to get the economy up and then bought one of the giant bombs once I had enough coins. Right as the bomb was in position with my soldiers, I had started my march on the enemy factory the next day. We arrived right outside of the cliff and made our way in. There ended up being 2 spawners in this factory which we easily took out. I lit the bomb and ran for my life. The huge explosion followed right behind me as I made my way outside of the portal. I'm starting to get pretty good at taking these out. Once I was back at the castle, I hopped on the ship with a bunch of my troops and we headed over to the 3rd island. Right as I landed, I almost repeated exactly what I did on the previous island. This included talking to the hermit, upgrading my keep, and activating the builder shrine. I had also been provided some information that it was going to be a blood moon. I made sure to gather all of my troops right outside of the wall that the enemies could attack at. We then started to fend off the invasion. It ended up being only a couple of small monsters. That was relieving. This also meant that the next day was going to be peaceful. This could be a perfect day to attack the cliffside mountain base. Once I had enough coins, I bought one of the bombs. Then, as usual, I marched my troops over to the cliffside. When we were inside, we caused complete chaos. I then lit the bomb on fire and started making a run for the entrance. Check. Now that's another monster factory completely destroyed. Even though everyone else was celebrating and this should be a moment of glory, I was honestly starting to feel very uncomfortable. This would be my very first time heading to the 4th island. Now you might be thinking, why is that such a big deal? Well, this was the island that my father had died on while taking out the monster factory. Right as I touched down on the land, everything felt pretty eerie. I immediately started doing what I usually do, but then I ended up at the area where my dad had died. I paid my respects and even saw the knights that served him. I made it a point to get off that island as fast as possible. Things didn't feel right. While I was there, I had discovered that there was a 5th and final island. I wasn't ready to go to it yet. So I returned to the 3rd island, recruited as many archers and knights that I could, and even upgraded all of the knights. I now felt ready, and I started to sail to the 5th and final island. Right as I had arrived, I didn't really know what I was doing. Since none of my ancestors had been on this island before, I had to start it off from nothing. I got a very basic camp up and running. I had one archer tower and a couple of walls. Things were going pretty smoothly, so far. I continued to upgrade my camp until it became a wooden keep. I honestly thought that this being the last island in the island chain was gonna be the most dangerous one, but the first monster attack was super light. It only had 5 monsters in it. This made me feel very relieved. I then started trying to get up some farms, and pretty much just upgraded my walls as much as I could. After fighting off the daily invasion, I headed out to explore. I passed my first portal on the right side of the castle, and then I made it past my second one. I decided that it wouldn't be smart to go any further, so I turned around and started to head back towards camp. Once there, I upgraded my keep, which in turn upgraded my walls. We were now utilizing stone on this island. The farms were finally starting to pick up. I had 3 farmers, which didn't seem like a lot, but I was at least getting coins. That's all that really was important. I was honestly starting to consider taking out one of the portals sometime soon. So I made some upgrades around the castle, and then made my way over to the very first portal on the right side with my troops. We had easily crumbled this portal, and I was in disbelief of how easy things were going. That was until I made it back to my castle. I had completely forgot about the retaliation attacks. We were in trouble. I started to think of the best way that I could survive the situation. I unfortunately didn't have my lizard mount, and my troops weren't going to be enough to take out all of these giant brutes. I tried my best though. I tried holding them back at every single castle wall as much as I could. This didn't cut it, and I knew that my time was over. I bravely turned around and headed right into the mob of enemy monsters. They immediately all started to jump on top of me and took my crown, gold coins, and gems. My short time as king was now over. I hope my brother Andrew will be able to do a lot better than I did. My brother Charles played a pivotal role in securing this kingdom. He expelled all of the monsters on the first 3 islands, and he even founded our colony on the 5th one. I, Andrew, son of Joshua, and brother to Charles, swear to rid this kingdom of these pesky little monsters. My first actions towards doing that was to restore the ship that my family had once sailed on. I needed to collect as many coins as I could because this ship was going to be able to transport me to every island that I needed to go to. So, in order to do that, I got the farms that were once active on this island back up and running. I then activated the Archer Shrine and hopped on my boat to head to the next island. Once there, it was almost like I was following my ancestors' footsteps. I activated the farm shrine, got the family dog back, and trained, then upgraded as many knights as I possibly could. That was it for the second island. I hopped on my boat and started to sail to the third one. Once I arrived, I pretty much just activated everything I needed and then headed to the 4th island. And who would have guessed it? I did the same thing that I did on the 2nd and 3rd island on this one. I'm definitely appreciative for Charles for making this so easy. I was only going to have to really focus in on the 5th island. Right as I arrived, I wasted no time at all. I needed to get the walls back up and sturdy, so that way we had some defenses when nighttime came. I braced for impact as I expected a huge army to pull up to the castle and try and fight us. If my brother, King Charles, was taken out on this island, I'm assuming it had to be brutal. The attacks must have been crazy hard to fight off. I definitely felt like I had an advantage. I needed to be the one to end all of these monsters here and now. I was super familiar with these lands, just like Charles was. Him and I used to explore while our father was ruling. That gave us quite the advantage. I also had all of the information passed down from my dad and grandpa, so I pretty much had no excuse not to succeed. If I failed, I would be a disgrace to the Vortide family. Well, here goes nothing. My very first blood moon where I'll actually be fighting off monsters. As I prepared for what I thought would be a chaotic night, I made my way over to the left side of the walls. I had only noticed a small amount of enemies. That was it? That was my first blood moon? Things felt a little bit too easy. I was expecting a lot more resistance, but I guess I can't complain. I now have a full day without having to worry about being invaded. I knew that I could use a whole bunch of coins on something that wasn't defense, so I tried upgrading my keep. I was one single coin off. I headed over to the left side of my castle where I collected some coins from my knight and my archers. I had then invested my coins into my keep. It was a little bit ironic because I really didn't think about it, but upgrading my keep into iron also upgraded the towers and walls that were directly next to it. So in a sense, I was upgrading my defenses even though I didn't think I was. Regardless if I wanted to, I now had to. The only thing that I planned on spending my coins on was better walls, more farmers, and better archer towers. The right side of my castle was looking really good. I had all iron walls, and my 2 archer towers were both at least stone. One of them was the max level that they could be. Even though I had a pretty big castle on this island, I realized that I wasn't very familiar with the island itself. So I headed out to the left side of the castle. Right as I passed my first enemy portal, it had activated. It then had unactivated and reactivated again. One of the little monsters had jumped out and tried to jump me. So I ended up just heading back to my castle and swore that I wouldn't be going past that portal until it was destroyed. In preparations for my first attack on one of the enemy portals, I trained some more archers as well as upgraded my knights. That was when I gave my soldiers the command to head out and start taking down the portal. You could tell right as they finished because the whole sky turned red. It was also only a matter of time until all of the enemies were outside of my door knocking. They definitely weren't being shy about sending as many troops as they could. The flying monsters honestly were doing some pretty good damage to my archers. Thankfully enough, they were shot down by all of the arrows. It was now just us and the giant brutes that just loved to cause issues. I made sure that my catapults were equipped with as much fire ammunition as they could. The enemy giants still made their way through the first wall. My knights did their best to slowly retreat while my archers still shot arrows backing behind the second wall. I was pretty happy that I had upgraded knights because they knew what they were doing. They definitely had a lot of experience and must have seen this kind of scenario before. The monsters still weren't backing off. They kept trying to hit the walls as many times as they could. I utilized my griffin's wind clap so that way they wouldn't be able to do too much damage to it. Every time that they would get close to the wall, I would just blow them away from it, so they were taking arrows from the archer towers behind them, as well as my soldiers behind the wall. After what seemed like forever, the monsters were finally defeated. I knew that things were going to go well on this island, especially if I kept up that same strategy, but the attacks were only going to get harder and harder. So I needed to make sure that I expanded my walls as far as possible and upgraded them to the best tier. I also made it a point to upgrade my ship so that way I would have an escape if need be. If only Charles did that, he would still be here to this day. At least I can learn from him. I ended up breaking my own word, but I did it for good reason. I ran past the portal on the left side of my castle. That was where I came across a chest that had a whole bunch of gems and a shrine that I activated, which seemed like it gave my knights some kind of bonus. I ended up running back to my castle as I didn't want a repeat of what happened last time with that little monster trying to jump me. I had then realized that it was another blood moon. I needed to make sure I was prepared. The last one wasn't that bad, but I wanted to make sure. Only around 10 little monsters had tried to attack my castle. My catapult ended up wasting 2 of its fire shots, which was kind of annoying. Those were expensive. Since I was looking at another peaceful day, I had decided that it would be a good time to send my troops out to attack the next portal. It seemed like we were ready for it. I escorted them right to the portal, and they started doing their thing. It didn't take long for them to destroy it, and I ended up building my teleportation portal right over it once it was destroyed. The enemy retaliation attack began. I saw only 2 enemy air units heading in, but then I had seen an additional 5 behind it. Let's hope things go well. What I thought was going to be 2 flying monsters was actually 6. And this was only the beginning of the attack. It only took a matter of seconds for my archers to take out all of the flying monsters. But also in that time, the giant enemy brutes had made their way over to my castle walls. They started pounding on them as giant thuds were heard throughout my kingdom. I wanted to minimize the damage that these monsters were doing to my castle. I ended up utilizing my griffin's long wingspan to create a force so mighty that it pushed back these enormous beings. No matter what I was throwing at them, whether it being arrows, wind, or even fire, they still pounded as hard as they could on my iron walls. With this invasion being so intense, I didn't know if we were gonna last. But that was when I got a glimpse of hope. I saw that 2 of the giant beings had evaporated into thin air. This must mean that the other monsters are gonna be defeated soon. We just need to keep our efforts up. I didn't just take the leadership of the crown to be defeated here and now. That's why I, Andrew of the Vortide family, will deliver this island from all of the monsters on it. I will bring peace to this kingdom and finish this battle once and for all. Wow, talk about convenient timing. Right as I was encouraging my troops with my inspiring speech, the final giant monster had been defeated. We did it. We had survived the retaliation attack from the last portal. The sky was so red from those monsters being so angry that I had completely forgotten it was the middle of the day. I'm glad that that's all over and the sun's out again. We only have to survive a few more of those attacks and then we can do our own. My coin pouch was feeling a bit empty. There were only 2 golden pieces in there. So I headed over to my nearby farms to collect as many coins as I could from the farmers. This would be able to pay for my next invasion of the dock portal. Once I finally had enough gold coins, I had sent all of my troops out to attack. The only issue was, it was already a little bit past morning, and I was just starting my invasion now. I honestly hope that my forces will be able to get to the portal before the enemies attack for the night. Well, there's only one way to find out. As I marched my way towards the dock with my troops, the little loot goblins had started to attack us. My army clashed with theirs. We both had a similar amount of troops. It's just mine were a lot more prepared and a lot more well equipped. We had finally made it to the enemy portal on the dock. Surprisingly enough, we weren't really met with much resistance. I had figured that since this was the last dock portal that the enemies had, they might want to defend it. Apparently, this wasn't the case though. There were almost no monsters around to witness what had happened. The portal was destroyed. Since this was the 5th and final island of the island chain, it meant that I could now safely travel to all 5 islands, especially after putting up that lighthouse. I really didn't feel like walking all the way back to my castle. Luckily enough for me, there was a teleport right next to the lighthouse. Teleportation is so convenient. It honestly was convenient and necessary, because by the time I got over to the left side of my castle, where the next attack was happening, the enemies had already broken down my first iron wall. Luckily enough, all of my troops were able to make it behind the second wall just in the nick of time. The only thing that didn't survive was my catapult. I was definitely okay with that, as long as I didn't lose any of my troops. This attack was very similar to the last portal retaliation attack. I really utilized my griffin to get as much air claps as I could. This kept the giant monsters at bay while my archers and archer towers took them out. I was very proud of myself because I had survived the attack. I was a new king after all, and this was only my second time fighting off a giant invasion like this. Weirdly enough, I really wanted to fight off another attack. This might sound really strange, but there's something about it. Defending your walls while taking out your most evil enemy. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Once I had enough coins, I had sent out my troops on the left side of the castle. I definitely felt relieved knowing that I didn't have to worry about the right side anymore. This for sure makes things a whole lot easier. My troops wasted no time at all, and the portal was already destroyed. I didn't count exactly, but it seemed like they had taken out the portal in less than 30 seconds. The enemy response time was also pretty impressive. They sent out the retaliation attack in a matter of minutes. Well, here goes nothing. The huge horde of monsters was looking quite intimidating. It seemed like there were so many more in this raid than there were in the last one. Good thing I have a ton of archers. Surprisingly enough, we had defended the castle from the first wave of enemies. All that was left now was the second and final wave of giant brute monsters. As they made their way over to my wall, my catapult had shot over a fire barrel that landed directly in the middle of all of the enemies. I did a really good job utilizing this fire. Every time that the monsters would take one step closer, I would use my griffin's wind clap to push them back into the flames. It was also really hard to tell how many enemies were exactly left. I could confirm at least 4 or 5 of them, but there was definitely more than that, based off the speed that they were destroying my castle wall. Wow, these guys are really relentless. My troops and I even had to retreat back one wall just to continue the defense. If only these monsters were working for me, I would be able to take out all of the enemy portals on a single island within a matter of one attack. Even though they are my enemies, I could definitely say that these enemy types were very tanky and very committed. Defense completed. I was very proud of my troops because we didn't take any casualties from that invasion. That's pretty impressive if you ask me. I figured that we were going to have to expand the castle walls and upgrade the ones that had recently gotten destroyed. This honestly wasn't a good time to do it though. It looked like the enemies had sent over their actual attack wave for the night. I completely forgot that it was night once again. This red sky always fools me. Compared to that last portal retaliation attack, this regular night attack felt like nothing. There was less than 20 little monsters. Now that's pretty pathetic. They're gonna need a lot more troops to take me down. Right as the next morning rolled around, I headed out to explore past the next portal. I ended up stumbling upon a gem chest. This was pretty nice because I hadn't seen gems in quite a while. I even had to drop some of my coins just to pick them up. I then continued in further in the forest. That was where I found another gem chest. I needed more space to hold these gems once again, so I dropped even more coins. Out of nowhere, the monsters jumped out of the portal that was closest to me. This was super confusing because I thought that it wasn't even close to nighttime. How could this possibly happen? Once I made it back to home base, I accidentally picked up some coins from some farmers and a few of my gems had fallen out of the pouch. I ended up juggling my coins and gems just so I could fit them back into the pouch. This was pretty funny because I was suffering from success. Soon after, I ended up spending some of those gems on unlocking the hermit that has a giant horn. I also had unlocked this new mount that was a unicorn. It basically flew in from nowhere. So of course, I was going to try it out and see what this thing was capable of. I really wasn't too impressed. Its sprint speed felt very slow, and it took me a while to get back to the castle. I wonder what makes this thing so valuable that it costed me 4 gems and a whole bunch of coins. I'm sure I'll find out soon, if there even is anything to find out. I decided to use my new hermit to try and upgrade one of the walls. I wasn't really sure what I was going to get out of it, so I just paid the coins and waited for the construction to finish. Once it did, there was a giant horn just sitting on top of my iron wall. I was a little bit disappointed because I thought that this upgrade was going to upgrade the material of the wall, or at least reinforce it in some way. I ended up paying a coin to try and activate it. All of my troops on the right side of the castle had moved in to defend that wall with the horn on it. This could definitely be utilized in those retaliation attacks. I found out why the unicorn was so expensive. As it was grazing, it had pooped out 3 different gold coins. Now that is quite the skill to have, especially during the winter when it's hard to get coins. Too bad I couldn't have unlocked this mount a lot earlier. I would have really utilized it when I was on the 3rd and 4th island, struggling for money. Now the kingdom is flourishing, so I really don't need it. But it definitely is hilarious. Since I had so many gold coins, I decided that it would make sense to return back to the dock and upgrade my lighthouse. There was also a portal that I had never constructed there, so I constructed it. Once the lighthouse had finished its upgrade into stone, I then upgraded it a 3rd time. The lighthouse finished its upgrade to copper, and I headed back to the castle. That was where I started to upgrade some of my knights. I wanted to make sure that I had the best equipped troops for taking out the next portals. That way I could minimize the losses and I wouldn't have to worry about my citizens dying. It also seemed very logical to expand my walls a lot further. So the first thing that I did to accomplish this was harvest the trees, which were completely cut down by the next morning, and then put up my new walls. It was super weird to see things constructed out of wood again. The last time that I did was at the beginning of this island. We had just settled here, and I was constructing a wooden keep with wooden walls, and even wooden archer towers. Man, the time flies. After upgrading a few walls, fighting off a couple night invasions, and upgrading my archer towers, it was time to send my troops out for another attack. I was starting to get really nervous because I didn't know how hard the retaliation attacks were gonna get. We already saw quite a lot of enemies in the previous ones, so I could only imagine it was gonna get a lot worse. I marched to the portal with my troops, and they did their usual thing. They had taken it down in a matter of seconds. I had then started to construct a portal of my own over it, and that was when the retaliation attack hit. I was incredibly confused because I had only counted around 6 flying enemies. This was super strange because the last attack had a lot more. Maybe they're trying out a new strategy, and there's a lot more giant brute monsters this time. We'll see, I guess. Surprisingly enough, there weren't that many. I was really confused about this because who would have thought that this attack was going to be a lot easier than the last one. This was just proof that the enemies were running out of troops, and they weren't able to expend as many as they could before. Since we had taken out another portal, I decided that it was time to expand even more. So I built some new walls, upgraded some old ones, and cut down even more trees. I repeated this process night after night after night. That was until it was finally time to attack the next portal. I scouted it out, and it appeared that this portal was the last one before the cliff portal. My soldiers very slowly made their way over to the rendezvous point, which I was already at. I had set out some coins as bait, just in case the monsters wanted to attack. They did take the coins, unfortunately, but they had went back into the portal and kind of seemed like they were freaking out. It seemed like the enemies started to get their stuff together once my archers started to shoot some arrows. Unfortunately for them, they still didn't have enough troops to take out my forces from destroying the portal. Good job, soldiers! I made it back to my castle and started to prepare for the retaliation attack. I wasn't really surprised to see it, but the enemies had sent even less troops than the last time, which last time it was even less troops than the time before, so they were really lacking. I used my usual tactics of using my wind clap to push the enemies into fire. This was effective as always, and I was able to take out the enemies with ease. I was pretty satisfied with myself because I had stocked up on as many fire barrels as I could hold. This way, the catapult was able to constantly keep shooting off fire at the enemies. It also meant that they were going to be burning a lot quicker. After my constant barrel flinging and wind clapping, the enemies were finally defeated. Well, we did it. Now we just need to take out the cliff portal and blow up that last mutant factory. Wasting no time at all, I had my troops rendezvous with me right next to the portal location. The moment we had finally been waiting for such a long time was coming true. My knights and archers were taking care of this last portal. This would be the last one we ever see, assuming things go successfully. I really wasn't too worried though. I had trained my troops to be so strong, and I had so many of them. The warriors of Vortia were ready for anything, especially the knights. They lived for this kind of thing. After constant damage, the portal had completely shattered into little pieces. There really was only one thing left to do now: destroy that factory. I teleported back to the kingdom, and that was when I purchased one of those giant bombs. We just need to get this thing all the way to the cliffside successfully. The only thing is, I'm going to need some more builders to push it. So I hired a whole bunch of builders and then waited the night out just in case there was any attacks. Morning had arrived. Ironically enough, my troops and I started our march on the day of a blood moon. This meant that the enemy resistance was going to be fierce. But my troops are a lot more fierce. I scouted up ahead just to make sure there weren't any enemies waiting for my huge army. I was also in disbelief. This is what 3 generations of the Vortide family had led us to. We all were dreaming about this moment for the longest time, and it was now finally happening. I arrived at the cliffside, and I had to wait for the rest of the troops to arrive. They were hauling a big bomb after all, so it was going to take some time. Once they were here, we wasted no time at all. All of my troops and I had entered into the portal. Since this was the 5th island, I was predicting that we were going to have to take out 5 of these little monster makers. I really had no idea how these things worked. They spilt out a whole bunch of goo, and there were monsters in it. Was this where these monsters were being born, or were they just being transported? I honestly couldn't tell you. All I knew is that we needed to destroy these. We had taken out the very first one pretty quickly. We had then moved the bomb over to the second one and started shooting arrows at it as soon as possible. It wasn't long until the second one was destroyed, and then the third one. There was the 4th one, and then finally the 5th and very last. I don't know what it was about this last one, but it seemed like it was holding out for a lot longer. Maybe it was built stronger than the others because it was a lot closer to the mainstream of goo. Regardless of the reasoning, my troops had destroyed it. They had put their hard work and dedication into shooting as many arrows as they possibly could at the thing. This was the moment of glory. It looked like we were finally at the main pump of this whole factory. It was almost time to ignite the bomb. We just needed to move it slightly more into position. I lit the bomb and started to make a run for my life. My soldiers were close behind because they didn't want to be caught up in the explosion. This was it though. This is the moment that we had been waiting for. Everything had led up to this single moment. It was finally time to get rid of this plague that cursed these islands. I really wish that my father and grandpa were able to see this moment. They would be so proud of me for destroying this last factory and securing the kingdom. If you enjoy my content and want to get further involved in the community, join my Discord, link down below.